So, welcome to Cultivate Your Calling. My name is Lionel Hilaire. I am a coach, author, speaker, but my favorite title is that I am a husband and I am a father. I am also treasurer of Divine Potential Services in the beautiful city of Sunrise, Florida, where we have helped hundreds of individuals via our conferences, our events, where we would bring in mental health therapists, educators, those who inspire people to just live a more effective life and restore, revive, and just thrive in their lives. So today, I just happen to have a neighbor of mine, not happen to have, but one of my major sponsors for Cultivate Your Calling, my new book, and his name is William Honore, and I'm sure you guys are gonna really enjoy and hear what he has to share with you today. So without further ado, I just want to introduce William Honore. It's a pleasure to have you on, man. I thank you for being a major sponsor for Cultivate Your Calling. And when I reached out to you, you didn't even hesitate. I appreciate that, man. The guys in our community, the men in our communities really need this boost. And this book really came from a tragedy that happened in our family on March 29th of 2020. My then 18-year-old daughter came bursting in my room and saying, "Dad, I got to go to the hospital." And I'm thinking, like, did she eat another that she shouldn't be eating? Okay, I see. Yeah, that's my camera. Um, and then, all right, and then she she's like, "No, Tyrell was shot," and Tyrell, her boyfriend of 2 years, was shot. She didn't want us to give her a ride to the hospital. She said, "I'll go myself." And so I said, "Well, me and your mom gonna stay back here and we gonna pray." And that was like 11:30 at night. About 2:30, 2:15 in the morning, she calls my wife's phone. Kyla calls my wife's phone. And I'm looking at the phone and I'm like, I'm not answering that. And my wife answers and put it on speakerphone. And Kyla said, "Tyrell has passed." And I mean, I never intended to have children, to raise them and for them to plan a funeral. And that was one of the hardest things. We had COVID. On top of that, we're still in right now, but that was like just right in the beginning. Matter of fact, we're like not maybe 2 weeks away from the anniversary. So I realized really quick that if men do not do three things, that black women, men, and children are in trouble. So if black men don't do three things, our communities are going to remain in a crisis or even get worse. So that is restore within himself, restore in his relationships, and restore in his career. So William, I want to bring you on and just introduce yourself, and tell us something cool about yourself that nobody really knows.
That's Thank you for having me, Lionel. As you said, we grew up as neighbors, and you know, asking me to tell you something cool about myself, that might be the toughest question all night. Um, but my name is William Honore. I serve right now as the president of the Florida chapter of the United States Minority Contractors Association. I also serve as director of acquisitions for Bloom Medicinals. Bloom Medicinals is a nationwide medical cannabis company. And I also serve on various boards of churches locally, helping pastors to organize their churches and to grow. And so, something cool about myself, I guess, uh, something that happened very early on is I had a bass teacher. I used to play the double bass. And most people don't know that. I used to play for Broward Symphony Orchestra. I played with Daytona Beach Symphony Orchestra as growing up and in college. And one night, uh, my bass teacher, who's world renowned musician, he played backup for Billy Joel, and one of his other bass players on stage called out, or he got sick or something, and I was just finishing a lesson, and he says, Billy Joel is playing in Disney, and I'm the backup, and I'd like for you to join us on stage. So once in a lifetime, here's little William Honore, wet behind the ears, scared out of my mind, not even being able to play what they were playing. He says, just play the 1-4-5 chord the whole time and just smile, and no one will know the difference.
Wow.
So that was a great experience. Yeah.
Wow, that is awesome, man. So you played backup for Billy Joel?
In a Disney concert.
At a Disney concert.
Right, right.
Wow, that must have been like you wanted that time to just pause right then and there, huh?
Very, very, very fortunate to have that experience. Yeah.
Man, that's amazing, man. Congrats, man. That's really cool. That's awesome. Now tell us, what was the relationship like with your father?
Mm-hmm. Well, my father, you probably noticed, Lionel, my father he's not even a baby boomer. He's from the great generation. We buried him back in 2018 at 102 years old. So
Wow.
he was a Baptist minister, of course. He was an evangelist. He was a church planter throughout Haiti, and he immigrated to this country at 65 years old, when most people here are retiring. And so imagine this old man, 65 years old, a wife 30 years his junior, with 3 kids, immigrated to this country at 65, and then we had 2 more siblings, so 5 kids, 5 young children at that age. So very great man. He was a man who wasn't so touchy-feely, right? He didn't express emotions in the same way that most modern men can, but he definitely instilled faith, right? Everything about him was teaching us what it is to have faith. I remember when I was going off to college, just one experience where I packed up my bags, and I hadn't even planned properly. I just packed my bags in my car, and I said, I'm going to drive up and figure it out when I get there. And my mother was practically weeping. I was leaving at 4 o'clock in the morning, in the middle of the night. My mother was practically weeping. And my father just asked me one question. He said, do you believe? He didn't say, do you believe in what? He didn't say what he was asking me about specifically. Just a general question. Do you believe? And I said, yes. And he said, let's pray on him and send him on his way. In other words, if you believe, that's all you really need. So that's the kind of man he was. Very, again, not very touchy-feely, not show a lot of emotions, but very structured and always teaching us the faith. Very structured home.
Wow, that's amazing. Girly says, wow. Funa says, good evening. Joshua said, let's go. Funa says, epic. And then Girly says, how awesome. Yeah. So, with that relationship with your dad, did he go out? Okay. He'll come back in. But if you have any questions for William, you can ask them right here in the chat. I can see you on YouTube and on Facebook. So, William, I'll bring you back in.
Okay.
Yeah. So, tell us more. Like, what is something that you learned from your dad? I know he said, "Do you believe?" Now, that is so powerful because in our culture growing up, it's like you do what I say. And that's it. But your dad, that was amazing. And when I used to always see your dad, it looks like he has such a wisdom over his life, bro. And I honored that. I just saw how he moved gracefully.
Mhm.
Tell me something that you will keep forever with you that you learned from your dad.
Um, well, I mean, I can go on forever, but there's one thing that always stood out to me. Um, if you ever heard my father pray, you know, you can hear him preach, right? He was never this fire breathing preacher. He spoke a lot of truth. He got very emotional, and he had a very direct way of speaking when he preached. But if you ever heard him pray, he literally sounded like a child.
Mm.
And to me, that showed you the source of his strength because there was such a reverence for God that when he spoke like a child. It literally sounds like a 6 year old in such a submissive voice. And, that relationship, it taught me very early on that that's the source of everything that he was able to do. Um, uh, that humility carried on, by the way, to his interactions with people, how he honored everyone, he treated everyone the same. He would be involved in people's lives, not the type of pastor that was hard to get to. In fact, when we were growing up, uh, people could knock on the door at any time of the day
Yeah.
or the night, and my parents would get up in the living room and they would counsel couples and they would help them. And so he didn't see himself as important as his position. He was more interested in serving people, and I think all of it comes from that relationship that he had with God. You know.
Yeah. I know the title of our show was how men can be more effective in their careers. Now, how can and I ask you those questions because I believe that a great root cause for men to show up effectively in their lives is to have their father or a father figure in their lives.
Mhm.
Did the advice your dad give and just you observing your father, did that help you become like the businessman that you are today?
Mhm. Mhm. It definitely helped me become good at what I do and confident in the marketplace. But there's a couple of other things that I think having the father that I did helped me to become. One is that having a father establishes a relationship with authority. One of the things that was broken when our people were enslaved was this relationship with authority figures, and that the slave master would literally damage that relationship. He would reconstruct and corrupt that relationship with authority, such that um, people that grow up without fathers, that there's a distrust for authority figures. And if you have a distrust for authority figures, then typically you're operating in either a sense of independence or you're operating in rebellion, right? That's a big problem because you come to this world with nothing. And everything that you get in this world, you receive it from others. You get the mentorship, you get understanding, wisdom, work ethic, whatever it is that you receive it from others that are older than you. And so if you have a distrust for authority, a natural distrust for authority, that means you're unable to receive what the world has to give to you.
That's that's awesome. Yeah. So you said that if there's a distrust, right? Can you repeat that quote? You
Yeah,
said
if you have a distrust for authority, that means you're unable to receive what the world is giving to you.
mm, it's
Think
almost
about
like
that. Go ahead.
it's almost like when they tell you like if a child can't read by the third grade, they start building the jail cell for them.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
it's like you're doomed for failure if you cannot trust authority. Like you will try to make your own way
mhm,
without through wisdom. So that person most likely is not going to read books, the right books. They're not going to watch the right things. They're just going to consume things that provokes or encourage their ignorance per se. You
Right.
get what I'm saying?
Right.
Now, you have worked in corporate America and now you are an investor and a businessman. How did working your 9 to 5 help you transition to your dreams?
Well, so I started my career with a pharmaceutical company in New York City, and I remember the first day on the job. I'll never forget it. Again, completely intimidated by this huge corporation, the position, the job, the money, everything that was involved. Um, and the first thing that they did is they assigned me a mentor, older Hispanic woman. And I remember the first thing that she told me. She said, after a whole day of orientation and meeting people and this and that, she said, by tomorrow morning, I want you to do two things. She said, first of all, never introduce yourself as William Honore again in this company. Introduce yourself as Bill Honore. William is too formal for this company, right? And the second thing she says, go out to a pawn shop tonight, buy a wedding ring, and put it on. She said, single guys don't do well in this company. Could you imagine that? Imagine the look on my face. Imagine like my jaw dropped and I was just in awe. Like, who does this lady think she is? But as I went along with the company, I stayed with them for 3 years, and I went along. And what I realized is that the advice that she was giving me was absolutely 100% accurate. The company culture has a certain way about it. And me being a junior in the company, I couldn't just come in and treat that environment the way I wanted it to be. I had to conform. I had to be prepared to succeed. And so that's one of the things that helped me a great deal in my career, and just going out and finding mentors as early as possible. No matter what it is I'm doing, I typically find someone and I interview them. I buy them dinner. I'm constantly asking for advice. And I found that people who've already done it, one of the things that they long for is to share what they've done. It's one of the things I think is untapped in this world, is people don't tap into people who've already done it.
Hmm.
Think about even Bill Gates, richest man in the world. What did he do right away? Become friends with Warren Buffett. Why? Because he needs advice from someone who's been doing it since the 70s, right?
Hmm.
So it's one number one thing in the world that you can do to become successful, is to find a mentor at whatever project that you're doing, someone who's already done it.
So now, you've dropped some really great tips, and I hope it doesn't go over a guy's head who is struggling in his career, whether he's working in corporate America or whether he's working at a mom and pop or whether he's working in his own business. Tell if there was one guy that you wanted to just inspire today, that he is struggling in his personal life, he's struggling in his career, and he's just trying to find a way out,
Mm-hmm.
and try, and probably does not even know he's in his own way.
Mm-hmm.
What advice would you give to a man who is struggling in his career but wants to take it to another level? You said, find a mentor, find somebody, but what is some, like, that's like a practical
Mm-hmm.
advice. What's a spiritual advice you would give to a man who's struggling with climbing that corporate
Mm-hmm.
ladder?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So there's two pieces of advice I would give. The first one is you need a spiritual mentor as well. It's also called a pastor, right? But you need a personal relationship with someone who's older than you, someone who's been in the faith longer, who can give you advice on life in general, um, and hold you accountable. Someone you can be honest with, someone you can be straightforward, and they can speak into your life. You give them the permission to speak into your life. That's number one. Number two, with regards to their career, I would say that young man needs to start wherever they are, right? If you look from Genesis to Revelations, there's only one come up plan in the Bible, right? There's only one way that you see people advancing in the Bible, and it's not by revolution. It's not overthrowing governments. It's not robbing people. It's not taking over. It's not get rich or die trying. The one come up plan from Genesis to Revelation is stewardship. And I would tell that young man to start wherever they are. So if you're flipping burgers at McDonald's, you need to treat that business like it's your own. You need to be throwing out the trash. You need to do everything that you can as if you own that company, as if you own that location. And when you take care of someone else's business like it's your own, that's how you learn to get ready for your own. Because if someone blessed you with it today, guess what? You wouldn't be ready for it. You would lose it. And we've seen that over and over with lottery winners. They're not ready to steward the resources that they've been given. So I know I've practiced that, and people will make fun of me. They say, "Oh, they said, you weren't getting paid for what you were doing. They didn't pay you for all that." And the whole point is you do it first so that they will have to pay you. That's how you negotiate your value in the corporate world. There's no oppression when it comes to business, pure business. Um, if I'm worth more in my boss's position, right? If I'm worth more in my manager's position than the current manager, my boss, as a good businessman, will make that change, right? Sure, there's favoritism, sure, there are politics, but think about it. If I'm making you more money and I'm doing it consistently over time, it's bad business to keep me in my current position. And that's what you see with Joseph in the Bible. That's what you see with Daniel. That's what you see with Isaac. That's what you see with Jacob. All throughout the Bible, you see that stewardship, once applied, God blesses it, and then there's grace. There's favoritism. There's all kinds of things there. You can't expect Cain to understand the offering of Abel, right? Abel gave his best to God. He gave his best work forward. He gave the fruit of his hands to God. Cain looked at that and snuffed at that, and then at the end he was dismayed because God didn't accept his offering. And we in the same way, we got to give our best as if we were doing it to God. And it doesn't matter how unfair our bosses are, how they treat you, you still got to give your best. And if they're a good business person, if they're a smart business person, they're going to make the most off of you, and they have to promote you. That's how you negotiate value. You don't go in there feeling entitled for a promotion. You do the job ahead of you, do the job that you're under, and then they will promote you because it makes business sense to do so.
Yeah, that's gold. That's gold. So, there was another question because growing up for me, I struggled with um, temper tantrums. I struggled with brain fog, depression. Um, what advice would you give to a man who is struggling with emotional intelligence?
Mm. Um, yeah, that's a very difficult one. You know, the number one is you have to get help. you have to get help. If you're not emotionally stable, especially as a man, the world is very unforgiving of men, right?
Wow.
Whereas a woman can say, something happened, this happened, that happened. When a man enters the marketplace, you're competing with other men, and no one give a rat's behind what you're dealing with internally. And
Hmm.
so it's
Wow.
it's really up to you to get help emotionally. That may not be seeing a psychologist. Maybe you can't afford to see a psychologist. But if you're tithing, if you're going to a church, that's the pastor's job to counsel you, right? A lot of us go through the motions, and we don't actually take advantage of the benefits that the church structure has. Maybe someone's not even in church. Maybe it's calling up an uncle. Maybe it's calling up someone who's in your family line who know your genetic makeup, right? How are you wired, right? If you speak to any person in my family, honorary men are wired a certain way, right? There's a certain way that we've been taught, we've been cultured, and so someone has to know how you're wired to be able to give you advice. And the most humble thing that you can do is ask for help. It is also the strongest thing that you can do is ask for help. And as you look at the billionaires list, read the Forbes list, read their stories. I would say these are people that they did a lot of things right to get where they are. One of the things that they're very, very good at is asking for help. They recognize their limitations. They ask for help more than the rest of us.
Yeah, the most powerful thing you can do, especially when you're in the workplace, even as a leader, is ask for help.
Mhm.
And that was something that we were taught really not to do growing up. We grew up in the streets of Fort Lauderdale, and they would say, "Hey, bro, you got to get it how you live, or you just got to do things your way." Like this, it's a pride thing that we need to kill, that we need to destroy as men, especially black men. We have to kill that pride and ask for help. Just use wisdom. Ask for help from the right people. Ray, who on the corner slanging. He may not give the best,
Mhm.
advice when it comes to emotional intelligence, when it comes to building an effective career, because he's out there, he's doing something that is poisoning the people in our community. So that's key for us to ask for help from the right people who are a few steps ahead of you. They don't have to have arrived somewhere. They just have to be a few steps ahead of you, man. And
Mhm.
Ari Amari says, help build the channel, family. Get like he says get like up, please. It's help spread the channel through YouTube algorithm. Thank you, Ari. Yeah, hit that like button. It does help us with the algorithm here on Facebook, YouTube. It helps us majorly because we want to get this word out to men. My book, Cultivate Your Calling, that you see right there, was written from a tragedy that happened in our family, and I recognize that if black men do not do three things, black women, men, and children are in trouble. Black men need to be restored within themselves, within their relationships, and in their careers. At least three areas. If they can get those three areas flowing, man, they will be in our, we're already unstoppable, but we would help minimize the prison population and hopefully eventually close some prisons down. Man, I thank you. You know what I remember when the lady said that, your boss said when you went into that job, she says, put on a ring because single men do not do well in this
Mhm.
company.
Mhm. Mhm.
So man, that is gold. That's gem, man. Like, I really thank you for coming on and just pouring out and just sharing your wisdom and your insight. I have a surprise guest that came in today. One of my good friends that I met when I was working in corporate America. Uh, Man, if I tell you my story, a lot of people won't believe. I started at the bottom. I was desperate, looking for a job, looking for work, and and they gave me the job at corporate America. Gave me the job, and I was they offered me like $12,000 a year as a married man with children. And I said, look, I'll take it. Man, on my lunch break, I'm reading the Bible. I'm just trying to get some wisdom, some insight on how can I do better as a person. You get what I'm saying? And then 2 months later, the assistant manager came to me and says, you do not belong back here. I was changing oil. And he said, you do not belong back here. I'm like, I didn't say nothing grand. You know what I mean? Like, he just promoted me and put me into sales. And I was into sales for 2 years. And I was seeking promotion because I was already doing manager work. And that was like maybe a $16,000 salary, but I worked so hard. I ran circles around my supervisors that 16,000 turned into 40,000. Now that's how hard I was working.
Right, right.
And then I got promoted after 2 years of that second position, and then to assistant manager. Then after 2 months, I got promoted to store manager. So that was a double. Talk about double promotion. So I met my friend there. She is wise. She is a good friend of my wife and I and our family, our families and her families. We met a couple of times to hang out, bowling, and some other activities. Her son is a very awesome basketball player. And without further ado, I'm going to bring in my friend Shayla Bryan. Shayla, come on in the house. How you doing this evening?
Greetings, greetings, greetings. I am well. I am grateful to be here with you guys. How are you?
Nice to
Great,
meet you. Nice to meet you,
great,
Sheila.
great. I want you to give some feedback to William from what you heard. Share a little bit about what you heard and what feedback you want to give him.
I mean, I believe that it's so important that Black men continue to encourage other Black men because, as a woman, a Black woman, a Latino Black woman at that, for me, it's really essential to see the examples that Black men to have in the community that my son can be looking up to, that my son can see in the mirror and say, okay, there are men who are great. They're not perfect, but they're great. They're doing their best to contribute to their households, to their communities, and to occupy the space on this earth the right way. So I am absolutely grateful that I can be a part of a community of Black men who are contributing and exemplifying what Black boys can look up to. That not necessarily is a basketball player, can that's not an actor, that's not a rapper, right? But that can be a good citizen to the community, a good father, a good role model, a good leader, and that alone is priceless. So I'm just grateful and I'm humbled to be among you guys tonight.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so it is, and here's the thing, like when, things that entertainment that we get into, I like them and I like entertainment. But when it comes to education, that's something our culture needs big time. And, you know, we struggle, I believe, with, and what I found, I can speak for myself. When I was asking William earlier, I struggled with, emotional intelligence. And speaking of that, Kirk Franklin went with his son the other day, and his son says this happens more often, right? He said it's happened, but that's his words, right? But and I know you're a parent, but I don't have a 30-year-old adult child, right? Kirk Franklin does. So, but the things that he said, I'll break your neck, you get your mother effing self out the way, or I'm going to break your neck. He threatened to kill his own son. So I found I was disturbed, but I had people on Facebook saying, hey, I wouldn't have apologized because he came out, he apologized. I only think he apologized because he got caught. He was on recording. But there's people in our community that said they would not have apologized, and they said that they practically do the same thing. Like, how is this? We see a lot of this trauma response from our culture today. Tell me, Shayla, how is what's what do you think is going to happen to children that gets even adult children that looks up to their parent, especially a celebrity parent who's just telling him to go find your family in a sense? How do you think that can affect us?
I have two responses to this because, to be quite frank, I believe as a woman of God, a believer, that first of all, we all have to have extended grace to people, even when they are in a place where weakness, sin, right? The sin of nature takes the best of them. I believe that as a man, which is he's a man first, he probably went overboard with his emotions. I believe as an adult and as a parent, I have four children and my oldest is 18 years old. And I have had my occasions where my 18-year-old has tested my ability to really gauge my temperament, right? She has tested that. Granted, we all have had a moment where we have fell into this sin. Most of us never got caught, but he did. So I think that it's important that we pay attention to the judgment that we are passing on to someone, because what if that was you? Maybe you're not a celebrity, but maybe you are a representative of your community, your household, your family, and you lose your temper. You lose a sight of, at that moment, emotional intelligence, and you begin to express yourself in an anger. See, I went on a few nights ago and I shared this with Miss Audrey on her show when it comes down to the three emotions, the three key emotions that us human beings will navigate. And we can do that in instants, from love to anger, and then we can go into fear or vice versa, right? If you think about it, I'm going to give you a very quick example I gave her so you can understand how, as human beings, we can navigate emotions because environment triggers us. We get activated by another person outside exterior source. So you have a couple, right? It's in the space of love, they're hanging out, watching a movie. The wife says, "Oh, I'm going to run to the store to pick up some more wine," or she's going to pick up something. So, mind you, they're together, they're having a good time. She gets up and leaves the house. As she pulls out of the driveway, she goes about her business. The husband leaves the house as well without her knowing. So he goes in the parking lot, is hiding, waiting for her. She does not know. She comes back. Their parking is taken, so she has to go a little more down the buildings to go park. He knew it already. He was premeditating and waiting for her. So now she's getting out of the vehicle. She's walking back to their home, and she's hearing footsteps. So now you think about what she experiencing is fear, right? She's experiencing fear as she's walking fastly going back to the front door. When she gets to the front door, obviously to open it to get in, and she gets the tap on the shoulder, she looks back, it's her husband. Now she's angry. She went from being in love to being in fear to now being angry to the same person, all within what? An
Yeah.
instant. So what triggered, and I thought about that, is it's called the ABC model, right? And it's a great doctor, someone who did I can't think of his name at the moment, but he did a study on the most three common emotions that we go through. And sometimes it's activation by an environment, right? Then you have the response, which is the belief, and then you have the consequences, which happens after we respond to that emotion. So you have to think about the man, Kurt Franklin, as who he is as a man. So that's my first response to how he behaved himself. I don't say I condone, I say I understand, because I have children and they provoke me at times. Now, when it comes down to the grown child, we're not going to call this a child anymore. This is his son. He's an adult man and he can make his own decisions. Right or wrong, I believe that that was crossing the line. We know believers says that you don't provoke your children, but children are to honor their father and mother. Their days shall be long. So this young man is completely out of pocket. I would not have apologized to anybody because that's my business. However, he holds an esteemed position within what? The world, because his gift has made way and room from him, which is his gift of singing. And I believe that the world can condemn him, but if we don't extend grace, then we have to look ourselves very good in the mirror and ask ourselves, cast that stone if you have not ever got out of pocket. Maybe not cuss at your child like that, but got out of pocket. So that's pretty much my take on it. I give the man grace, man. I thank God that he at least maybe came forward because he felt the need for the people that he has influenced to apologize. But I extend him grace and I pray for him in private because I believe he deserves grace and not criticism or judgment.
Wow, wow, great feedback. Thank you, Shayla. And William, what's your take on that?
I would agree with Shayla in the sense that it's always important to extend grace, especially when it comes to parenting, right? Parenting is one of those equalizers that, you know, no one really is good at it, right? You may do well, but no one can say I'm the perfect parent. So I do think it's important to extend grace. However, Kirk Franklin, he's a Christian man in his 50s. He's been in leadership positions his whole life, right? Because of his gifts, because of his charisma, he's been in leadership positions his whole life. And what I was disappointed by, it was just there was no love there. There was no sense that he was speaking to his heir, a son, right? There was no sense that I'm speaking to mine. This is mine. This is a 30-year-old. He may be out of line. He may be out of pocket, but I would have liked to see more love in that situation. One and two, even if when you fly off the handles in the worst way, but whenever someone can go to the point of threatening with that type of language, that tells me that this is not something that he's taken ownership for in the past. He's had 30 years to work on himself as a man in relation to a wayward son. He's had 30 years to work that out with God on his knees, to wrestle with God, to pray about it, to get accountability for other men. And so that type of trauma only replicates itself. And in many ways, I'm sure that he received that type of treatment from his father or the men that he grew up around. He only knew that type. There's no other way that you can speak to someone like that if you haven't experienced that type of abuse, that type of pressure yourself. So on the one hand, I give him grace, but if it wasn't made public, how long would he continue to do this without taking full responsibility for his actions? So it's a question mark that only he can answer, right? He can answer that. He doesn't have to answer it publicly, which is something I really don't like. I'm so sick and tired of black men apologizing to the public. I'm sick of it. Like I could throw up. From Mike Tyson to Tiger Woods, I'm tired of black men apologizing to the public for private matters. He needs to address that privately with his circle of influence, with his accountability partners. He needs to address that on his knees with God, and he needs to take ownership. But he doesn't owe the world any apology for anything.
Right.
So
Yeah, that's awesome. Like great feedback from both of you. It's like, from like you said, what you said was key, was like he had 30 years as a father, to make things right with his son. Now, we had a perspective from a mom, and we have a perspective from, William, who is a father, a husband, myself, a husband, a father. I have a 19-year-old, and I'm looking to get to learn how to be more effective when I approach, my 19-year-old daughter, because when they become that age, they want to hang out a little later. They want to, kind of, do what they want, and sometimes it's not a problem. What's the problem? And so for me, I'm maybe like Kirk Franklin, like trying to figure out how can I get him to understand that I'm frustrated with your behavior, that I'm frustrated with your words. Cause like Sheila said, like, we don't know what, this on the other half. We only saw Kirk Franklin popping off, maybe he threatened his dad before, maybe, but at the same time, like, he apologized to the public, but did he apologize to his son, or did he, I mean, did he get advice from his lawyer on how to write an apology, which, I kind of understand, but did he go live and say, hey, look, guys, this is what's going on. Let me keep it real with y'all since my business is out here in the streets. This is not the Kirk Franklin y'all know. This is not me, but at the same time, I'm learning how to be a father to a 30-year-old man. I made a lot of mistakes. I love the guy. But a part of me is, disappointed in certain things, but, it shouldn't have gone this way. And I need help with my son. You know what I mean? Like, I need help. We need help. So from now on, I will be reaching out to someone who can help me, help us. And so, we can become, effective communicators with one another.
However, he did say in his apology that he has, over the years, have had involved professional. I don't know if you guys heard his apology. I listened to it, and I'm very careful of making assumptions or speaking on people's issues because, again, I know what goes on behind my closed doors.
Right.
And I would never, honestly, I would never judge anybody because I know what goes on behind I'm human. I pray a house down, right? I worship. I believe in the Lord. I can cast a demon out of anybody. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to being human, the Bible tells us that we will fall short. That is what is called being human. And if he goes before God and repents, he does not need an apology from people.
Right.
He doesn't.
Yeah.
But he said in his apology that he has, over the years, has made attempts to get professional help because his son is a bit out of line. And if anybody has had a child who has psychological issues, then you can understand. This kid knew he's not a kid. Now, if this was a 16-year-old, we can understand. He went really overboard. This is a teenager. We're talking a 30-year-old adult grown man who had the audacity to expose his father, to make his father look like somebody that obviously he wants to paint the picture. That's evil. So we can't sit here and condemn Kurt Franklin for a 30-year-old grown man decisions, making his father look like an evil man to the world. And what are you looking like? That's your father. You are not honoring your father like scripture said. So both out of pocket. If we had to put it that way, both out of pocket. He went overboard with his language, and the son is not honoring his father because, again, it boils down to, and this is something I'm going to go back to what William was saying. Yeah, we can be sick and throw up and be nauseous about how our black men behave, apologizing, but we also have to be understanding that money plays a big factor. You go ahead and go get your millions of dollars and let your children not get one piece of it and see how they find a way to just literally make you look like you dirtbag. You're scum of the earth. You're the worst father in the world. But you fed them. You provided for them. You took care of them. Once you hit a certain age, I think at that point, the umbilical cord has to be cut, right? So if we have to look at the big picture, money could be a factor in this. And it has been spread rumors over the years that this kid, because of his behavior, his father decided that he would not put him in his inheritance. Should he have to? No. So if we have to look at the big picture, again, we want to emphasize what we heard, but we don't know the full picture of these people's family history.
Let me just say one more thing, and to be clear, I'm not condemning him at all, right?
I
mean, there's no. I just want to be clear on my position here is that there is the grace for Kirk Franklin as a parent, as any parent could make a mistake at any time, and when you make that mistake, if the world saw it, we could all be painted as Al Capone here. So I'm with you 100%. I just want to, on the other side, just establish what the standard is. And when I mean that standard, as another Christian man to Christian man, the standard is we've got to strive for that point of turning the other cheek, or that point where our own personal egos are not involved in the moment.
That's right.
Right? So he could have hung up the phone. He could have, and I'm just saying that, again, I'm rooting for Kirk, right? I wish that he could have, in that moment, corrected himself, self-corrected, and it didn't go there. And not just that time, but maybe countless other times before that. We got to strive for that standard. So.
Yeah, that's so true, man. We can go on and on about that. And, look, my passion is for families. Okay. I don't, want to, for our families to be torn down. We already, society's already done that to us. Society's already done that. And I love Shayla's point where money is involved. And, on a side note, it's like T.I. and his wife, where they have these big accusations, and now it's said that they won't even get these charges brought upon them. And so it was like by close family friends, or I think maybe even family that are coming after them like this. And so it's like, you know, as we as entrepreneurs, as people and believers in the marketplace, we have to protect ourselves. And we have to get in circles like this, right? Interviews like this, and talks like this, where we talk about resolve. We talk about some issues, and then we say, hey, how can we do better? Both of you, William and Shayla, y'all brought some amazing key points. Like, us men, like, we need community. We're already being torn down left and right, front to back. Many of us didn't grow up with effective fathers or father figures in our lives, so we're still trying to figure it out, even as adults, like wishing and hoping that my dad was as effective as I needed him to be. I know that's my story, and I'm always evaluating myself, versus long time ago I would always blame myself, but now I evaluate myself. So that is the difference, when it comes to how I interact with my children. And so, yeah, prayers out to Kirk Franklin and his family. And we don't ever want for us to bash and make them look bad, because the news already do that for us. We don't need to do that ourselves. So I just brought it up so we can have this open dialogue with this.
We need
So
to pray. We just need to
yeah,
pray. We
yeah.
need to
So
pray. We need to pray.
before Shayla, I just want you, and then William will go next, to just what are some words of encouragement you would give a man who is struggling, a black man who is struggling in his mental health, and he just don't know where to turn. What advice would you give him?
Ah, that's a great question. I'm being a mom to a black boy, and obviously being a daughter to a black man. The very first advice I need to make sure that men understand is so relevant to get community, to be fellowshipping with other men, because the Bible says where two or more gather, right? Where two or more gather. So when you are with someone who's strong, who is a believer, who's you can look up to. I don't care how old you are. You can be 10 years old, or you can be 80 years old. The reality is that no one can do this walk by themselves. So it is important to have fellowship, to be surrounded by a group of individuals. You don't have to always be in your own lineage of family. You can create. I came to this country 20 years ago. I had no relatives. I had no blood family. I built a community of people around me and my children that I could call upon, that I could pray with. So that's the first thing I encourage, that man get fellowship, right? Then the walk to finding Christ it's an individual, it's a personal walk, right? However, it does help when you have people who are believers who can pray with you, who can help you understand what it's like to accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior in your life, and then you can start making better decisions. Mental health has a lot to do with what environment. It has a lot to do with most of the times this crisis and trauma that was unhealed, untreated, undealt with from childhood. A lot of people suffer with mental health from what trauma, right? Undealt with trauma. So I will always encourage Jesus and therapy. Therapy is critical. Getting professional help is so important, because it can help us dig deep into those core places that we have buried a lot of childhood past traumas that keeps us stuck, keeps us anchored. So there's three things I will encourage: getting fellowship, right? Number two will be to finding your walk with Christ. And number three is to make sure that you get professional help, because it always will make a difference. And it takes time, but it's absolutely doable. It's possible to change and create a better, healthier life.
Wow. Good. Good.
Wow,
Um,
thank you. That's great advice. William, close us out. For same question for you, like a man who's struggling in his mental health, and he's brain fogged. You're basically giving advice to my old self. What advice would you give this man who's trying to find his way but don't seem to know where to turn?
mhm. Well, I think I agree. I agree with first of all with Shayla's 3 points. Very, very important. And you know, when I think about how the Bible opens up with God creating creation and creating everything under the sun and then creating man, and he says, day one, this was good. Day two, it was good. Everything he created, it was good. And the first thing that he says was not good was for man to be alone. And so I would say that being in community is the number one above all else. First, you have to be among in a community of other men, right? Because you can't count on a woman, you can't count on women to give you that type uh, of understanding that other men can. One of the things that I do with pastors is specifically men in leadership positions is that sometimes they're pushed forward because of their gifts and they're in these leadership positions, but they're completely alone when it comes to real problems that they may be having. And so whether it be from the top all the way to the bottom, from the oldest to the youngest, men need to be in a community of men. That's across the board. It's the one thing that keeps you sane in this competitive world. You're competing physically, you're competing mentally, you're competing spiritually against forces that you can't even see. You need to be in a community of other men.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you, William. Thank you, Shayla. Thank you, you all. You said it just well, very well. I just want to thank my guests for coming out here. Let me get you guys back on screen. And and before we close out, I'd like to say 2 Timothy 1:7, that God has not given you the spirit of fear, but power, love, and a sound mind. So if you find yourself anxious, if you find yourself always panic, always in fear, know that God did not give you that spirit, but instead He gave you power, love, and a
Mm.
sound mind. Thank you for coming on tonight and listening, and for those who commented, please like, share with a man or a family or a mom or somebody that could benefit from this. Thank you, and see you on the